People are saying that a bunch of members have appeared at JHope's concert and perhaps he got emotional. We also have Jin believed to have gotten attacked during the Milan Fashion show, as well as police being called during a fan event. Say Dumplings, it's Dave Desai. Let's get into it. So this story that we are going to get into is a bit of an update on something that happened a little while ago. And when I say a little while ago, if you remember, right after Jin left the military, he decided to do some sort of fan meet and he decided to hug everybody. It was alleged that one woman ran up to Jin and actually kissed him on the neck. And that woman was later identified because it was believed she wrote a blog post alleging that his neck was super soft. People found it disturbing, but one fan actually decided to call the authorities on the person that kissed Jin. And I suppose that particular blog post calling Jin soft was really what pushed them over the edge to make that phone call to the authorities. Like a lot of things that happened within the government or just things in general, they don't get looked at very quickly, and this definitely wasn't looked into for maybe about a year and a half. Now, there likely are reasons as to why this case didn't get looked at very quickly. One of them was probably just the fact that they couldn't find the actual person who did this. Keep in mind, as I mentioned just now, this wasn't something that Jin or the label had called authorities on. And I'm not saying that the label or Jin wouldn't comply with officers if they did come knocking at their door to get more information, but I'm assuming that that didn't happen. Otherwise, I believe the label might have put out a statement concerning this, but we haven't heard anything. The charges to this woman are obviously sexual harassment charges, but she is also expected to be summoned in court a little bit later. It can definitely be interesting because regardless of whether or not any particular person that was involved felt sexually harassed, the bottom line is it could still be interpreted that way. So she can likely argue that she didn't do it or that it isn't meant to be in that way, but we'll see what happens. I personally do think it's very interesting that this particular fan was the one that called the authorities instead of Jin or the label, which resulted in this other fan who kissed Jin to potentially receive either a penalty or jail time. We don't know what the actual penalty will be. I do think it'll be interesting because neither the label nor the BTS members themselves, as I said, called the authorities. Does this necessarily mean that no sexual harassment was involved or that this case shouldn't be absolved? Probably not. I would be surprised if this wasn't argued in court though. Just the fact that it seemed like Jin wasn't bothered by this, or at least not bothered enough to make the report himself. I will also say there are numerous reasons as to why someone might not report this, especially a celebrity, even if they did feel uncomfortable. A celebrity might not want to be seen as taking action towards a fan over something like this because they don't want to be seen as very hostile and aggressive, nor do they want to make it appear like or feel like a fan can't just go up to them and show affection without getting sued. Now, of course, that's obviously not what happened. However, that doesn't stop people from interpreting it that way and feeling that way if Jin were to take legal action. I'm very curious to see what happens with this and what the outcome of this will be. I think it definitely sets a precedent, so if this were to end up being that all charges dropped, it means something very different than if it was moved forward, and could perhaps set a precedent going forward on what fans can and can't do during fan meets. And I just want to say that I'm obviously against fans doing this, but I just wanted to keep that story neutral. Now, while this was definitely an interesting update to hear about, this wasn't the only update that happened. Jin recently was in Milan to do Fashion Week or some sort of fashion show. And if you're unaware, Fashion Week or Fashion Month is kind of happening all around the world right now. So they're definitely doing a lot of fashion related stuff and they're being seen at these fashion shows, which is very cool. Now, if you're unaware, some fashion shows, definitely not all of them, have red carpets for guests, which are not always red, by the way. And specifically, the guests that are signed up to walk the carpet, as well as VIP guests, get to do that. So Jin apparently was set to walk during this particular fashion show, and there were a bunch of photographers that were taking his picture. I feel like it's a habit for him to kind of wave, and maybe in general he just feels a little bit awkward being on the carpet, but he was waving and he had his hand up, and one of the photographers actually told him to put his hand down. And a lot of people took this as very rude and were saying that the photographers were very rude. However, I have a bit of a hot take here, and as someone who's been on several red carpets, I have maybe a different perspective on what goes on. So when you're on the red carpet, you're faced with maybe 20 photographers. Of course, this depends on how big the event is. And you have essentially 20 photographers yelling at you and telling you to do different poses to get different angles of you. Given it's not always 20 photographers at once, sometimes it's done in sections so that each photographer can get a chance to get photos of you. But it's not always that way, and sometimes it's a little bit more chaotic where all photographers are kind of taking pictures at once, and they're not doing it one photographer at a time. Celebrities also aren't allowed to be on the carpet for an unlimited amount of time. Most celebrities or influencers that are on a carpet maybe have anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds. And yes, I said that right. It's 10 to 20 seconds for these 20 photographers to get the photos that they need. Now they're screaming at you and telling you what to do, and in this case, telling Jin to put his hand down because they want to make sure that these pictures look as good as they possibly can. That's their job. This doesn't mean that he looked bad with his hand up, but it means that they were looking for more fierce, more fashionable photos, and that might be with his hand in his pocket or him posing differently. Other people were saying things like he probably should have just left, but keep in mind that he was the ambassador of this fashion brand that he was at. And also these photographers are likely hired by the event. Are there paparazzis there? Are there journalists that are there? Absolutely. But those journalists and paparazzis are there because they are hired by the event to be there. The point of a red carpet is so that the event can get a bunch of pictures of you and then later put it in a press release to send to different news outlets so their event and brand can be promoted in news articles. Reporters, paparazzis, and journalists that are at the event are also asked or hired to be at the event so they can write articles of the brand and of the fashion show so that the brand can get more exposure. So that's why celebrities are asked to attend these red carpet events, because it's more likely that the brand will get press if a celebrity appears. They might have over 100 different celebrities and influencers appear at an event, but if they can just get one celebrity that can flood the headlines and have several news articles be written about them, then the brand gets a lot more exposure. And so I see this a lot where people will say, Jin shouldn't let these journalists get pictures of him. He should have just walked off. That's not how it works, and he's paid to be there as well as the photographers are usually paid to be there too. There was also a really cute story about JHope doing his concert. So if you're unaware, he is currently on a little bit of a tour called Hope on the Street, and people are very excited to see him do this tour. Now I believe he was in Seoul and he was having one of his concerts there. It was believed from the crowd that people spotted V, Suga, and JK there. Now people believed that V was definitely there because they saw him in his uniform outside the venue. So a lot of people were saying that it seemed like he came right after work to go see the show. Other people are unsure if the other two members were actually there because they were not spotted outside, and the only time that they were allegedly spotted was in the venue where they were kind of covered up, so they could have been anybody. But a lot of people were definitely freaking out about this because it really shows that their support for each other is never ending. And if all three of them actually did end up going to the show, it really shows that they all love each other and support each other so much that even in the military, they're making time to be with each other and support each other. Now, there were some people who were maybe hoping or thinking that JHope would have some sort of reaction to them showing up. Maybe JHope spotted them in the crowd and then started getting emotional and teary-eyed. I don't think that this is necessarily true. Well, of course, I think that he would get emotional. I just think he would have gotten emotional well before the concert. While I am absolutely positive that if all three of those members just showed up and walked into the venue, they would be allowed to walk in, but I just don't think that that's actually what happened, because then they wouldn't be guaranteed a seat. So I think they called beforehand, they texted JHope, or they had their managers do it, I don't know, and they sorted out getting tickets to the show likely well before the show even started. And so while JHope might seem happy to see them at the venue, if he were to get emotional, he likely would have gotten emotional the moment he heard that the three members were going to be there rather than the night at the venue getting emotional. However, the community themselves have gotten really emotional over this, and it's definitely something that I got a little bit emotional over too, because it really shows that they not only love each other, but that they're happy to be together and that the reunion is very likely going to happen. I think we've all heard words and we've all been disappointed by words, but it seems like this isn't just words, right? It seems like this is something that they actually do want to pursue. Let me know what you think. Make sure to check out Patreon for more videos, link down below. Thank you to this lovely comment right here. Love you, bye.